After a year and a half, I don't think you can call it the end of an era, but it's the end of Emery. Unai Emery has left Arsenal, and now they're looking for a new manager. Let's discuss where it all went wrong.
Well, I'll tell you where it all went wrong. To start with was, I think, Arsene Wenger stayed too long. That's the start of the snowball rolling down the hill. Because then became, I think, in my opinion, then became even more difficult.
Cat chasing the tail.
Yes. And a bit like Ferguson at Man United, who you can't say stayed too long because he had great success at the end. But Arsenal are having the same problems as replacing a guy who basically run the ship for 20 years plus. And because it went stale at the end and bad decisions were made at Arsenal, it was always going to make the next guy coming in's job even more difficult. That being said, whilst he had great success, as you know, particularly in Spain with Sevilla, with a limited budget, I've been really, really disappointed because I thought we were going to get a lot more out of Unai Emery. And I don't think, and I've said it, I don't think he's a bad manager, but he's managed Arsenal badly. I think the two can be separated. They went on that great run last year, and it was a great run, and people were going, oh, we're in the title race. No, never were. But it certainly masked over some of the cracks in that period. Spent in the summer, quite a lot actually.
Yep.
But Pepe, what? You know, and I don't know how much of it was him. You know, so you got Pepe coming in, you got a last-minute shout on David Luiz, and then you got Kieran Tierney from Celtic, the left back, who's a very good young player, but he has to prove himself in England. But the thing I don't get with Arsenal is when you're already a team that when you mention Arsenal to people, most people go fancy dance, fancy dance, no real grit. And then you go out and spend 70 million plus on another fancy dan, and Pepe, it just doesn't make sense as a strategy, and he's not been able to cobble it together.
He really misunderstood the defensive frailty, didn't he? I mean, he never got to grips and looked at it and thought, you know what, I need to strengthen that properly, as opposed to bringing in David Luiz, who isn't really a centre-half.
I need to figure it out. I need to figure out a way to play. I need to figure out a way to protect the back four. And he just didn't do it, and it's cost him ultimately it's cost him his job at Arsenal. But you know, the next guy coming in, whoever it is going to have similar problems, and so it's not an easy job. It is not an easy job, and I say Wenger probably stayed on a little bit too long, maybe 2, 3, 4 years, and it's just making that job even more difficult now. They're going to have to spend again, but they're going to have to spend better. You know, they dished out, you know, new contract to Mesut Ozil, 300,000 a week or whatever it was when he got it, was always going to be a headache for a manager. But I think his weakness was, and one of his weaknesses was, he wanted to fight the fight with Ozil, and he did. And he dropped him, and he said, I'll manage my way. And then he buckled, and he brought him back. And that was a sign of, I think he was unsure about what he was doing. That was a sign of weakness. And I'm not blaming Mesut Ozil at all for it, but he was the big name that was getting shunted around, not in the bus, not in the squad, not in the team. Now he's back in the team. I think it was a sign that Unai Emery was struggling to figure it out.
And he was under pressure to get those results, and he needed to just do anything to get it back.
Correct, and he still couldn't manage to do that.
As far as where the culpability lies, of course, they've got different departments trying to work on things. Not unlike another couple of teams in the Premier League, namely Everton, they seem to have a lot of mixed thinking behind the scenes. The owner thinks one thing, the sporting director might think another. They lost Mislintat, who left the club, obviously, who have been responsible for sort of trying to restock the team in the wake of Wenger not being there. What can Arsenal do to correct all of those issues? It's not just about the manager, is it? Well,
it used to be. It used to be about Ferguson, it used to be about Wenger, but that's not the way the game's sort of run these days at 99.9% of clubs. So they have to figure out a way of getting a really good technical director who works with a really good manager, and if they can't get, and they need them to work in tandem, and they need to sign the right players and make the right decisions, and they haven't been doing that. So it is difficult, because if I was managing and I had people going out signing players, I would be annoyed about that. But it's the way clubs are operating these days, and ultimately it's the manager that takes the fall, and not generally the sporting director or whatever he's called behind the scenes. It's a difficult one for Arsenal. They are chasing their tail big time in terms of what Man City and Liverpool in particular are doing, and it's going to be, I think, some more painful months, maybe years for them before they're anywhere near getting back to the top again.
The next decision they make on the manager, do you think it will be a short-term one or a long-term one at this juncture at the end of November?
If Arsenal need to be looking long-term.
Okay.
Right, they might as well wait and make the right decision, but there's no point. Arsenal need to make a decision that's for the next 3 to 5 years, not the next 3 to 5 months.
Okay, so Freddie Ljungberg in charge at the moment as a caretaker. We'll see where Arsenal go next.
Thanks so much for watching ESPN on YouTube. And for more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for premium content and live streaming, subscribe to ESPN Plus.